Okay. Esselamu Aleyküm ve Rahmetullah. Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbena heblena min ezvacina ve zürriyatina kurrete a'yunin vec'alna lilmuttaqine imama. La havle ve la kuvvete illa billahil aliyyil azim. Allahümme allimna ma yenfa'una ve enfa'na bima allamtana ve zidna ilma ve erinel hakka hakkan ve rzuqna ittiba'ah ve erinel batila batilan ve rzuqna ictinabe ve sallallahu ala Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve ashabihi ve etba'ihi ve sellem. ربنا اغفر لنا وارحمنا وأنت خير الراحمين آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين. Asif's video is open. If you, all right. We have been studying the story of Moses, and we arrived at verse 20, this is previous ones, maybe. No. Okay. 45 or 46. Is it correct? Yeah. Now, 95. Last week, we touched upon a very important point. Actually, two important points. One of them was the question of one of our friends who said, who asked or reminded us that we have to be very careful when you say to keep the harmony in the society that we are living. So we have to be careful about this. Harmony doesn't mean to melt in the melting pot, to get dissolved your identity, your any kind of identity, your personal identity, social identity, your religious belief identity, your cultural identity. You don't have to dissolve them, but at the same time, you should keep the harmony with the society, and we have to be careful about it. And we talked something about this matter last week. And the most importantly, with the children of Israel, the followers of any prophet, may feel that without the prophet among them, may not be following the teachings, messages of the prophet. The reason was, we said, in the example of the children of Israel, the example is presented to us through the experience with the prophet Moses and his followers in the language of Islamic tradition, his ummah, all the Muslims of that time. So these Muslims witnessed the miracles of the prophet Moses, And they were convinced that this man has something to do with God anyways, because extraordinary things are happening through his hand. It means God is with him. That's what they were convinced about. But we said this is a very important stage, that Muslims, or Muslim means really submitting to the truth of the message of the messengers. It means the community of the Prophet must need to educate themselves in the teachings of the message. Of course, educating oneself with the teachings of the messenger takes a long time, but to admire the miraculous actions of the Prophet and attach importance to him, it means attach the respect, veneration to the personality of the Prophet is very easy, and also it takes place very quickly. So you see somebody is presenting to you something miraculous, you just start feeling that you are admiring him. That is very human. What does it mean for us now if we attach importance to the virtue of any person rather than his teaching, his ideas? But for example, he is being very religious, very pious, very modest. All right, he's a very good man, okay, and he is very kind to everyone, he helps everyone, that's fine, that is very good, but it doesn't mean that his ideas, his teachings that we have assimilated with us. We have learned what he taught us. It doesn't mean that. That's why we have to be very careful not to confuse the personal virtue of the person and his teaching. But his teaching, for example, you may admire a professor. He's a very kind man, very respectful man, all right, gentleman, or very good person, all right, that we respect him, but it doesn't mean that you learned from him him or her what you are expected to learn. We said this is a good lesson for us. If somebody comes to us, for example, he has memorized the Quran, he knows Arabic deeply, or these are all fine, good qualities, and he is very respectful, he is very modest. These are all good qualities, and these qualities need to be respected. But it doesn't mean that we have learned his knowledge, we benefited from his teaching. That is very important for practical reasons, because human beings are, including especially myself, very hot-tempered, fast-tempered, quick-tempered. As soon as I see something very miraculous, I start developing an admiration about this person. And try to imitate what he says and try to obey what he says and accept what he says without digesting it. This subject, I thought, was very important to take notice of. In the example of Moses' followers, Moses' community, ummah, it means the community of a prophet. What the Quran tells us now in verse 95, Moses said, what was the matter with you, Samaritan? Very famous verse, actually. Most of the people know it by heart. قال فما خطبك يا سامري. What was the matter with you? What were you trying to do? Why did you do this? You are supposed to be a knowledgeable person. That's why people followed him, because of the respect to his knowledge. Must be, or some other qualities. Quran doesn't specify it, but he must be one of the usual way of presenting the Quran. For example, the magicians, they were knowledgeable people. That's why people were following them. We guess that Samiri also, among the children of Israel, means among the Muslims, the followers of Prophet, he was a very knowledgeable man. But knowledgeable about what? Having knowledge doesn't guarantee that we learn the truth from this person. There are many people who have great knowledge. Maybe we can tell them that it's a walking encyclopedia. It doesn't mean that he knows the truth. He appreciates the truth. It doesn't guarantee it. So we have to be careful about this point. Now, Moses comes and asks this man, this person that the community is following now. What was the matter with you, Samaritan? Why did you do that? You are an intelligent person. You are not expected to do this. And you should really teach them, maybe by following my representation, Aaron, or working together with them, helping him, and try to educate people in the teachings that I brought to you. Because everybody accepts that what I brought to them must be correct because they admired me because of my miracles. That doesn't work. That's why the Quran goes into details at this stage of the story. So it is interesting what reason Samaritan presents to Moses. It is very interesting. Let's read it. He replied, now Samaritan is speaking now. I perceived something they didn't. People didn't. What is that? I took in some of the teachings of the messenger. Oh, this point is very crucial. Look, he perceived something, I took in some of the teachings of the messenger, but he doesn't really present it. This is my idea. He says, no, look, but what Moses was saying, you have a God? Yeah, we have a God, correct. And some of the teachings of the messenger, but cast them aside. It means not throw it away. No. Put them into the molten pot God. It means general culture, the culture of the people in general. I put them there in this melting pot, because it is going to be mixed with other cultural elements as well. Maybe strange ideas, strange to the teachings of the messenger. I put them into the molten gold. Why did I do that? My mind prompted me to do what I did. Now, it is important to notice this. وَكَذَلِكَ سَوَّلَتْ li nafsi. My nafs, my mind, my desire. Not nafs doesn't necessarily mean only mind, but my desire, my perception, my understanding. So what is going on here? Well, that is what the Quran is drawing our attention to. An intelligent man who is respected by the people took some of the teachings of the messengers, it means religious elements. So the religious elements are mixed with whatever the human egoistic tendencies, egocentric inclinations want, mix them together and give a kind of religiousness as well, religious color in it, and then feel comfortable that, look, I am living this world, I am doing this kind of activities, daily activities, but I am not totally against religion. I am not denying what the messengers brought. For example, the foundations of what the messengers brought is belief in God. I'm not denying God. I have the concept of God, and I believe in him, but I am mixing it with my egoistic tendencies, expectations. I am mixing them together. And this is very appealing, as long as we don't deny, as long as we don't really go against the very fundamental teachings of the prophets, which is belief in God. As long as we don't contradict the belief in God, we think that the rest of what we do in our life will be safe according to our expectations. So this man was very clever, which is very common nowadays. Especially we know that in a society where general people are believers, general people follow a kind of religious tradition, a little bit, even partially, but somehow. And general public cannot really deny cannot be really deny the concept of God, because it is not very easy for any human being to say that there is no creator, the things are happening by themselves. It is not very easy to deny the belief in God in general, although God may be defined in various ways, but still God is the creator of the universe. So at the end of the day, I found myself believing in God. But afterwards, a friend of ours wrote in the chat box that, yes, I believe in God. God created the universe, but my job, my boss is paying my livelihood. It means my company is the provider of my provisions, my food, my needs. That is very, practical, isn't it? So I have to do this in this world. Of course, we have to do, but they are the source of satisfaction for my human needs. That is what we usually confuse with belief in God and at the same time uh, accepting the values or the cultural values of the general society as they are. But of course, it doesn't mean that I should leave the way I cook my rice or my food. That's not the subject here. The main subject is while I am cooking, I use certain ingredients. When I use certain ingredients, I may be aware that these ingredients are created by God and presented to me, and the uh, taste that I get from the ingredients are just God's actions, not they are not coming from the ingredients itself, as if ingredients is entertaining me. Ingredients altogether are entertaining me or satisfying my taste. No, the creator, the presenter of the ingredients are satisfying my taste. Otherwise, the way you cook is not the matter, however you cook it. But you have to cook it, of course, with the general principle that we have to follow the way of not wasting, not being wasteful. That is one thing. Of course, it needs it needs one's understanding of waste, what wasting is, depends on one's culture, etc. But we have to be very careful while we are choosing a certain way of acting or doing anything, so that we should take care of, if we believe in God, what God gives us, or even somebody doesn't believe in God, still they say we have to take care of other people's needs, etc. Again, these are our considerations, and these considerations must be adjusted to the teachings of the prophets. But if we really don't get educated in the teachings of the prophet, what we do, we find ourselves inevitably mixing up with other elements than what the messengers teach us. That is why we have to study, we have to concentrate on studying the teachings of the prophet. It means what the religion presents to us, what the message of the prophets presents to us. We have to study it. These people at this stage, followers of Moses in the example, at this stage represents us the idea that if you join the community of a prophet, it means identify yourself with a certain religion. Say that I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim, all right. And then I follow this, okay. In order to follow, you have to learn. But if you yourself, or if I myself don't learn, myself don't learn, if I don't learn myself, that I'm emphasizing on it, what I do, I follow certain people, not because what they teach, but because their personal virtues. That is the link between the previous stage of Moses, the prophet Moses' life, and presented in the Quran, and this stage. What summary got hold of the minds of the people while Moses was away of the community? His some personal values that the people respected him. Otherwise, they wouldn't do what they did. They followed him. So when Moses came back, of course, this is the example presented to us so that when we are together with the teachings of the Prophet itself, we found out that this seemingly scholar of religion or of any other subject, doesn't matter, a respectful person, this seemingly scholar, was using some elements or some religious elements mixed up with alien, strange culture, strange to the teachings of the Prophet, cultural elements in it. This is the most important problem that we are facing today among the believers of any religion. That's my idea. That's my personal idea. Lack of personal education. Personal means educating yourself. Of course, you will educate yourself in social institutions, inevitably. Personal education, I mean educating your own individual person. If we don't do it, this is inevitable to happen. It is inevitable, it is unavoidable. What we will do, first, we will mix up the religion, certain parts of the religion, with the culture that I am grown in. How will I know it? That's a practical question. I don't think we can know it unless we study the message that we inherit from the teachings of the Prophet. We don't notice because it's very simple. Everybody understands it. If you don't know something, you are not aware that, or you or I, if I don't know something, I am not aware that I am missing that thing that I don't know. If I know it, I would be aware of it. If I have not learned it, I wouldn't be aware of it. For example, I haven't taken any, let's say, engineering class. I don't know anything about it. If you ask me, what don't you know about engineering, I wouldn't list it to you. I would say, any subject related to it, I don't know. Only when I study engineering, whatever the engineering it is, mechanical engineering, whatever, I will know, I didn't know this, but I learned now. I will become aware of it. It is exactly the same in matters related to religion, related to belief. That is what the Quran is teaching me here. The Quran is not teaching me what happened during the life of some people and gossiping about them, maybe blaming them, what stupid people they were. As soon as Moses left their community, they started following a person who is mixing up everything, mixing the religion with other secular elements. And they are bad people, but we are good because we are not, we belong to the children of Israel. This cannot be the purpose of the Quran or the purpose of God, who speaks to me in order to gossip a group of people. Backbiting. So, of course, it is not expected from the creator of the universe to speak to me and just talk about other people, and I have nothing to do with them. So I cannot take it by saying that I have to take my lesson from it. That is what we are talking. What lesson we can tell? We can take this. That is the purpose of the teachings of the Quran, of course. Now, do we have any question here? Because it is a sensitive subject. It seems to be very simple, especially the way I present it, very simple, because my understanding is simple. I don't make the things complicated, look or sound very, how do you say, intellectual or academic, or I just take it, study the Quran, and learn what the gist message is there for me now, practically. So it may cause some questions to come up in your mind. How about this? How about that? For example, I was brought up in a Muslim community. Yeah, as I was, and maybe most of us are in the same position. So I was brought up in a Muslim community. What I found in my family, because my family is a Muslim family, so I learned from them. I presume that I learned Islam, the religion of Islam, what Islam teaches me. I would say, be extremely careful. Are you sure that your parents also did the same thing from their previous parents? Grandparent, your grandparent, and their grandparents or parents, and without knowing, it is in the course of time mixed up with many other elements. How can you be sure? Yes, we have to have good relationship with our family members. That is what my feelings tell me, and what the Quran also tells me. I have to be in good terms with my family relationship. That is very fundamental matter related to social life of a community. It is very, very important to have a sound family relationship. That is correct. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't develop your profession. For example, let's say your parents were businessmen, but you wanted to become an architect. When you start taking the architect course, are you opposing the family relationship and breaking the family ties because you are studying architecture? And my mind says, no, that is my profession. Exactly in the same way, your family may practice something, and you don't know whether they may practice something as the Samaritan presented here, which means religious elements, praying, fasting, yes, believing in God, yes, admiring the prophet, and really admiring the miracles of the prophets, appreciating them, but how much they have educated themselves with the teachings of the prophet. That's what the crux of the subject here. How much? You don't know. You have to have a good intention, good thought of your parents, or your family life in general, but at the same time, in order to make sure what they are practicing, what they are presenting in their life, what they are teaching you is what the prophetic message teaches you. How can you make sure that? As far as I understand, there is only one way. You yourself have to study the teachings of the messenger. It takes time. You must benefit from the teachers It means in the example presented here, Aaron. Aarons of the prophets, if you like. Aarons of the prophet. That reminded me hadith narrations from the Prophet Muhammad. He says, the scholars of my ummah is the prophets of, like, it means not exactly, like the prophets of the previous people. What does it mean? If there is no other prophet coming after the Prophet Muhammad, or a prophet, so far we see no serious prophet who claimed that he has received the message and demonstrated miracles and etc., and the teachings of this person make sense to me. I haven't seen anyone. And you or I may see or study some great scholars, but it doesn't mean that they claim to be the prophets. They claim to be the prophet as well as accompanying with the miracles supported by God. I haven't seen anyone. So there is no prophet. So how can I learn the message of the teachings of the prophet in his practical life, which took place almost 1,500 years ago? How can I learn it? Of course, I have to learn the transmissions. The people who educated the following generation, and until to me, now I get the heritage, the heritage of the teachings of the prophet. I need a teacher to learn from it, but what I should never, ever ignore, that is a crucial point for me. You have to be convinced about the truthfulness of what these people are teaching you. It means it is on you to confirm it. It is your individual responsibility. How can I make the distinction between whether I confirmed it or I took it for granted that what this person taught me is, it's a great scholar, so it must be right. No, you don't do this when you go to school. For example, if a professor teaches you something, you start to make sense of it. Let's say professor is teaching you, let's say you are taking a medical study, biology or chemistry, whatever, and professor told you that if you do this, your muscles becomes like this. And you have to see it in your lab, in your life experience. And then you say this professor is teaching me the truth. It means you must be convinced about it. For example, if the mathematics teacher tells you 2 + 2 makes 5, can you confirm it by using your own mind and saying 2 + 2, it means 2 × 2. If I put 2 here and another 2, what does it make? 1, 2, 3, 4. But the professor said 5, but he's a great professor in your eye. He narrates many things from the subject of mathematics. Will you be convinced about 2 + 2 makes 5? I wouldn't. I would say, no. Either you have to prove to me, or I wouldn't be convinced. I wouldn't take it for granted that it is true. So exactly the same. If I narrate here, if I, for example, in the screen, you see verses, we are studying verses here. So I am supposed to explain and bring the practical meaning of these verses into our practical lives. So whatever I say, you will accept it. Maybe saying that this man is an old man, this man has a beard and his beard is almost all white, so he must be a mature man, correct man, yeah? And I would just listen to him and take it for granted, whatever he tells me. Never do that. Never do to anybody, especially to me. Be careful with I say. Does it convince you personally? So if a person comes to you with lots of narrations from the Quran, narrations from the Hadith, doesn't mean that the way he interprets it correct. It's a correct method he is following. You have to be careful about it. So when you get the cultural elements, the heritage from the prophetic teaching, you have to, through certain people, of course, it is inevitable, either you have to read a book which is written by a person or go to a religious education center and learn from there through some teachers, instructors. So when you get them, you have to question whether it makes sense to me or not. It means, you will ask this question, am I convinced about what the person is teaching? Right. And the question here, it is important. That's why I stayed on it a lot and talked about it maybe in a repetitive way. So this one and this one. If there is no comment, no question, I will go to the following verse. Verse 97, Moses said, "Gone with you, go away. Certainly your Lord," look at this now. After having this attitude, okay, Asim, I've seen your hand. Thank you.
Very awesome.
Okay, before going to the next verse, go ahead, please.
I was just wondering, I guess last time we touched upon the verse that said that Aaron was there, but nobody took Aaron seriously, as opposed to having Moses around. And we sort of discussed in terms of what can Aaron possibly mean. And it's really my awareness and consciousness about my reality. However, I was wondering, why would I not take that seriously, like what my own consciousness or awareness is saying? Because just appearance-wise, yeah, I mean, if we were just to take the verse at a literal level, where I'm like, well, who are you? Aaron is really a nobody, pretty much. I need the real, the real teacher or professor, Moses. I need, to listen to him. And so within myself, I find this awareness and consciousness. I'm thinking about, why won't I mean, applying that to my case, similarly, I wouldn't take what my human feelings are saying seriously, because I need something additional to be convinced. Yeah, so I was wondering about that.
The last point, I think we have to talk about, I need something additional to be convinced. Yes, we need something additional to be convinced. What does it mean? Not only the personal value, virtue of the person, but the content of the message itself. I have to go through education in order to educate myself with the message. This is the early stage of, in the example of the Quran, early stage of the followers of the Prophet. Early stage, which means Prophet brought the message and presented in his life, but it needs to be digested. It needs to be, it needs education, training. Hearing once is not enough. Just getting a general idea is not enough. Excuse me. Now, Sarah, your video is open. Sarah, your video is open. All right? No. Okay. Thank you. So, we need to educate ourselves rather than attaching value to the person itself. For example, Aaron. What was the problem we studied before when Aaron asked them, follow the teachings of Moses, what they said is an example for me. We will not obey worshiping it until Moses returns to us. It means we won't obey God, the God of Moses, or the God Moses presented to us, the belief Moses presented to us. We won't do it. We won't follow it until Moses comes to us, because they respect Moses. This is important. They have seen the miraculous actions in the hand of Moses. That is not enough to respect the person, to see the miracle. That's why the Quran says, this is another side subject, but it is important. In the Quranic examples of the prophetic life, the Quran itself said, Quran itself says, the people ask the prophet, that we sent the prophet to them, messenger to them, and people ask the messenger, show us miracles. Quran says, no, there is no need. No, the prophet doesn't have to show you miracles as you want, but as God wants. Whenever it is necessary, he presents it, because seeing the miracles presented through the hands of the prophet is not the reason to believe his message. That's what we have to understand. So seeing the virtues of the people that we are taking lesson from, we are learning from, is not the last point. We have to start from there, that this person seems to be a knowledgeable person, respectful person, the trustworthy person. So I have to follow it because he presented some enormous, unbelievable, supernatural, they call it nowadays, things to me. So he must be supported by God, the God who is the creator of the nature in general. So he is the creator of the order of the universe. He can change it anytime he wants. Okay, I got so far. So that's it. But it doesn't mean that I have learned his teaching and I am personally convinced about it. So if a person comes with a miraculous knowledge, if you like, and presents to us, it doesn't mean much for me, because I have to learn, I have to educate myself. So that is what we have been talking here. The most important element in our life is to be convinced personally about the message that we are encountering with. I don't know whether it is the answer or not, maybe irrelevant to what you asked, Feria. So if it is not related, just let me know that we can talk more. You can explain, I can explain, and we share the ideas together.
Thank you. It's helpful. I need to think a little more on that, inshallah. But yeah, that was a good start. Thanks.
Now, Momina says, how do you know what is true and what is your professor is, and what your professor is teaching is not false or misinformation, because they are the one who is teaching me. I put some level of trust in them. Yes, correct. From the beginning, say, this is the professor, this person claims that he knows the subject, and I am a student, I must learn from him. But it doesn't mean knowledge is belief. Knowledge is not belief. Belief is one's personal conviction. Again, I'm repeating, belief is one's personal conviction. Professor's teaching cannot be your belief unless you are convinced about the truthfulness of it. As I gave the example, I don't know whether you wrote it before or after. If the teacher tells you 2 + 2 makes 5, because it is your teacher, would you believe in it? You will say, you will think about it. You will consult your own soul, whether it is approvable or not. But we have to make distinction between learning process and confirming it. For example, I was taking French classes. I didn't know French. I was taking French classes. My teacher taught me with very simple things. I know, and everybody knows that, that if you see a person in the morning, if you say bonjour to that person, he will be happy and reply you back. He won't be surprised. He will understand you. That's what professor taught me. So what I would do, I would go to the people and I would say bonjour to these people, to French-speaking people. They will be happy if I was taught, and I will confirm it, not because I trust the teacher. Teacher teaches me, but trust is another matter. Being convinced is another matter. That's my very important point that we have to share here. Being convinced is another matter about the teachings. This professor may be a very good man, very knowledgeable man, but he may teach you something wrong. Says, in the evening, if you want to speak French, you have to say in the evening, bonjour to people. You have to practice it. This is a practical example, of course. You have to practice it in the evening to say people, bonjour. They look at you strange. They don't accept it. They don't reply. They say, bonsoir. Or do you mean this? Do you mean good evening? What do you mean? So you will say, something is going wrong. Although professor says he's a very good French teacher, but you know that as he doesn't know really something. So as long as you are not convinced within your own, I've seen Shahrani family saying, I will give you, inshallah, soon the mic. So if I'm not convinced in my practical life, in my own consciousness, in my own spirit, in my own conscience, it means soul, then I cannot approve it. It's not my belief. It is the knowledge I learned from the teacher, but it's not my belief. Cannot be my belief. I am convinced about it. So we always speak in this class, there are three ways of information. One is the universe, the physical existence that we are experiencing. The other is our senses, our spirit, gifted to us, which is given to us by our Creator to understand Him, because the spirit is from Him. It means He is the truth. My spirit can recognize the truth, but with one condition: after being taught. Never forget this point. After being taught, my spirit recognizes the truth, but not everything that I am taught will be recognizable by my spirit. That is conviction. If my spirit is not convinced about it, it cannot be my belief. It is an information, but misinformation, wrong information. I cannot benefit from it. I think we have to make this distinction. For example, if you are taking a medical study, and let's say your teacher taught you how to make the operation, for example, heart operation. Okay, you are taught, and you go and practice it as you are taught, but the heart operation is wrong and doesn't work, is not successful, it's unsuccessful. What do you say? There are two options. Either the professor taught me wrong, or I am practicing it wrong. What you have to do now, you have to go to the professor until you learn in a way that it works for you. It works within your own life experience. You cannot be convinced what the professor taught you is correct until you are successful in your practice. Only then it becomes your belief. Only then it becomes your conviction, and you can practice it safely. Otherwise, you will be always suspicious about what professor taught you, because it didn't work for you. These are material examples. About the belief matters, you have to use the criterion of your souls. Your soul. And now, in the practical example, you have to use your practice of your body, operating with your hand, speaking with your tongue. Okay, Shehrani family, go ahead. I think this matter is settled.
Actually, Assalamu alaikum, you've already said what I wanted to say. It was that my experience with learning about the difference between acquiring Islamic information and actually learning to confirm a message from my Lord is, there'll be a certain telltale signs. For example, if you have suspicions, or if there's ambiguity and it doesn't really make sense, you're just accepting something that's said, that's probably just Islamic information. How it becomes true conviction, as Brother Ali has said, when it makes sense within the life that Allah Ta'ala has given you. Like, you can say, yes, this is the way that my Lord has made my life go like this, and I've noticed these things, and this is true about the message. And so now I can come back to the ayah that I've read in the Quran, and I could say, yes, it's true, I've seen it. I see you came, you sent me this message. I went out and looked at my life, I remembered my life story, and yes, I could see it. I can affirm this. and it'll be consistent with it'll be consistent with the qualities that we recognize in the creation. But if it's something that just doesn't feel right, or it leads to suspicions, and it's leading to negative effects, or it's probably, that's not the path of conviction or yaqeen. And the other big litmus test is this transforming my life? If I am being transformed in a way that I can see how I am recognizing and becoming more aware of my creator, then it's probably real conviction. But if it's remaining ambiguous, and if there's lots of suspicion, and sometimes you're not always aware of the suspicion, but it comes out in a way of it's something's bothering you, then then that's on the other side of just acquiring information and really not knowing what to do with it, or how to confirm it, and not really benefiting from it in a way that will transform you and prepare you for meeting your Lord.
Thank you. Otherwise, how would you, or would I, or would we recognize the false teaching and righteous teaching? How would we recognize who is the prophet, who is the fake, false prophet claims to be? For example, how would I know the difference between the teachings of the prophet and teachings of a philosopher? How would I know which is right, which is wrong? So when we say those people don't respect the prophetic teaching, are wrong, according to what? And when you speak to them, they will say those people who follow somebody who claims to be the prophet are wrong. How would I know which was really correct? Both of them claim that they are right. So God has given the criterion within our own spirit to make the distinction between right and wrong, so that I will recognize the difference between true prophets and false prophets. This is the only way I can use it. But one thing I emphasize on it, and I don't think I emphasized enough, although I said it several times, after being taught, after learning, we can make a judgment about it, whether it is right or wrong, before being educated, before learning the message from anyone, from a professor, from a prophet, or from a professor, or from a philosopher. Before learning, I wouldn't know which one is right and wrong. That is why I have to educate myself, and then it becomes a knowledge, and then this knowledge must be confirmed or rejected according to my own criterion that God has given me. But I should never, ever forget I have free will to cover up the truth, to deviate myself. I have to be very careful to be honest within myself. If I am not honest within myself, if I do what somebody said, that is what my nefis, my ego, made it lovable to me. That's why I mixed the entertainments of the people with what the messengers gave us, some of the teachings of the messengers. So mixed up and make a calf. That is why my nefis loved it to do. That is his choice. I have to think about it, whether Moses' teaching of one God is correct, or whether Samaritans presentation of the calf as the representative of God on earth is correct. So I have to use my intelligence, my human spiritual qualities in order to come to a conclusion and decide. It is not that I have to take, this is prophet, it must be correct. They have been in history many false prophets. Many false prophets. After the Prophet Muhammad died, for example, many people came up in several tribes claiming to be the prophets. Because I thought, if I say, Muhammad said I am a prophet, everybody followed him. If I say I am a prophet, they will follow me. Of course, no one will follow them because what they were saying didn't make sense to them. Did have no repercussions in their spirit. No, it wasn't really acceptable for them. So they rejected it. But what Muhammad taught must make sense to them, must have made sense to them, so they confirmed it. Like I studied this and I said, this is exactly what my life reality is. So that's why I confirm it. Thank you. And let me say, all right. So, inshallah, we will follow the next Wednesday from verse 97. And we will go to another very interesting phase in the history or story of the Prophet Moses. Very interesting phase. This is very much practical. Everything is very much practical. Anyway, so this is more practical than what we expect it to be. Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we will stop here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Wa akhiru da'wahum an alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin bi hurmati sirri surat al